let's get into like battles, the role of gold in battles, and the way Alexander moved that to his advantage too. Could you get into? Let's start with like what happens before a battle, the rituals. What did that look like, and how important was that for the morale of the soldiers?
The soldiers expected this, and they got it. Now, it'd be incredible for Alexander to omit it. One case, for example, is in Phoenicia. This is what we now call Lebanon. This was a sacrifice to a local god, not far from the battlefield, at Issus, again in present-day Phoenicia, present-day Lebanon. And such a case as that, although we can't prove it, Alexander must have somehow or another conveyed to the local god that this god was being worshipped properly by an invader. We don't exactly, in this case, we lack detail, but what I'm suggesting is very reasonable. Why go up to the top of that particular hill if it's no place in particular? But it isn't, of course. It's a mountain named after the god.
So, sorry, what are you saying?
In other words, when you're in an enemy's country, the first thing to do isn't to kill the enemy, it's to seduce the gods. Play it safe. Play it smart. Play it pious. And let your men know you're doing it. And of course, just before the battle, you can still worship Zeus. The more the merrier, or in this case, the more the deadlier. That's the scheme. The reason to lay siege to Tyre is he wants to perform a sacrifice there to this god associated with Heracles. And of course, worshiping Heracles in this particular case provided political clout. Apparently, it was one of the requirements of the priest king of the city. Now, Tyre was an oligarchical city. The Phoenician cities were oligarchies of merchants mainly, but there would be a priest king and he would have some measure of power. And this is what the siege is ostensibly about. Of course, it's actually about getting the navy of Tyre either destroyed or on Alexander's side. And the beautiful effect is, once Alexander establishes himself in Tyre as a legitimate ruler, Phoenician merchants start turning up everywhere the army goes. And it's because they're already there. They've been serving the Persian king. Alexander arrives. Ah, yes, the new man. And they serve him. They're an important part of his administrative and logistical support, these Phoenicians. Their language, by the way, is Aramaic, which is the same as the language of the Jews at this time.
Okay. And the omens that Alexander would read then before the battle, trying to understand if the gods are maybe also on his side. If they weren't on his side, did him as a priest king, did he have like the influence and power to kind of like change the narrative and change the way he picked up the omen?
This is controversial because we don't have enough evidence. We could use, let us say, a dozen examples, as though it were a game of baseball. How many times did he come up to the plate? This time, that time, and the next time. Did anybody muff this catch? And so on. We have examples of controversy or a conflict between him and his own priests who assisted him. If they gave negative word, he might object. There's a famous case of this out in Afghanistan. One of the priests objects. Alexander scolds him, dismisses him, conducts his own sacrifice, goes into battle, and gets badly wounded. And the attitude of the men is obvious enough. Don't go too far north in Afghanistan, it won't pay. The gods don't like it. Although, of course, today we look at it and say, it won't pay for other reasons. I mean, ask the NATO forces who tried it. It just won't pay up there.
Okay, so he had like a good understanding that he could change the way of the omens.
Although if he did that constantly and never used the experts, he would be harming himself. They have prestige too. They have good political sense too. Some of them were used by his father. The king can't be everywhere at once. Donald Trump can't do the job Elon Musk was supposedly doing. He's too busy. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a business very much blessed by the president. Alexander needs priests and generals in the same obvious way.
But if he's changing the narrative of an omen, doesn't that kind of say that he didn't always truly believe that all omens are the truth?
That's one cynical view of it. But of course, he would not encourage the cynical view.
Of course
But
not.
did he have a conscience? That's the beauty of ancient literature. It almost never asks this question. It asks many other questions instead.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to moralize about him, but it's, I wouldn't say easy to understand him, but there's a massive evidence that helps us understand his personality, his situation, and so on.
Mm. And in the battle itself, um, how much did gods play a role in the battle itself, or were they just too busy fighting so they couldn't even be thinking about this?
This Homeric business, which is what you're thinking of, has faded out.
Okay.
Battles have become so complicated and armies have become so much better organized that what we would call the state of temporary insanity that lets you think Zeus is over there 30 yards away, killing one of your enemies. Well, it wouldn't be Zeus, let's be fair. Might be Poseidon. This has faded out. Religion plays a role in the outcome of battles, but gods are not thought to intervene at crucial moments. There's just no report of that whatever. Even when Alexander's in his worst trouble, which is in India at one point, scaling a wall, the story doesn't say Apollo jumped down and was it Apollo? Well, another story says it was Poseidon, and one said get on board Alexander, but the other said Alexander told him to go fly away. It was bad for his reputation to be seen to be so weak. I'm inventing this. It's not there. That's what
Mm-hmm.
the stories are. No, they say nothing at all like this.
Okay. So the gods mostly played a role before the battle and then afterwards, I guess?
They can
Was
pay the
there like
role afterwards by inflicting various misfortunes.
mm,
Plague might be due
mis-
to them. That goes back to Homer, of course.
mm-hmm. And misfortunes if you lose, or misfortunes if you kill but with no mercy?
Yes, denying mercy, a subject I wrote a book about, is an error that can be committed. It isn't always wrong to deny mercy, but sometimes it's wrong, and it's most especially wrong to ignore anyone begging for mercy. Like a good judge, you must hear the case. You don't have to always convict, or for that matter, always acquit. But you have to hear the case. The Greek sense of procedural justice is strong. And no doubt the Persian was too, but we know less about it.
Hmm. And were there any moments that the Macedonians did think that Alexander had pissed off the gods?
Well, they thought in India, the bad weather, very bad, monsoon, they didn't know it was a monsoon. They thought it was bad weather. They thought Zeus was angry. And they wouldn't go on. Now, they had other thoughts too, such as horrifying rumors of large Indian armies in what is now Bangladesh. But they added to that the bad weather, and they thought Zeus was to blame, and they refused to go on. The officers also refused. In different accounts, the officers take the lead. In others, the men do. The officers are companions. This is the biggest setback in Alexander's career. An outright defeat, administered, so to speak, on him, and not resulting from a battle. His companions said no, and that was that. He had to turn back. Without them, he couldn't go on. He couldn't replace them. He never thought of it. He complained. He didn't like it, but back he went.
Yeah, you need your army if you want to win a war.
You need
It's a
some generals
must.
if you want to control your men.